Welcome to this segment of Inside the Teen Mind. Today we're exploring middle adolescence, ages 15 to 17, the stage many parents describe as the storm and stress years. Whether you're listening to this alone or as part of our full episode, this segment will give you insight into the emotional intensity, identity exploration, and social changes that define the high school years. I'm Dr. Lisa Connick, clinical psychologist and founder of Connick & Associates.
And I'm Amanda McMillan, licensed clinical social worker and executive director of the Alive Center. All right, let's transition into the next stage of adolescence, which is the 14 to 17. So they're transitioning into high school, which I think we labeled this the roller coaster stage.
Yes,
right?
The transitional stages.
Yeah.
So if we think about early adolescence as about awakening the emotional intensity and the brain growth, then middle adolescence is where things really start to take off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So these years really can feel like a roller coaster, not only for the kids, but for the parents. It's full of highs, drops, and plenty of twists and turns along the way. This is the stage when teens are transitioning typically from middle school into high school, which is a pretty big developmental leap. Suddenly, the world feels a lot bigger, and the expectations really rise along with that. And there's the complication of more freedom and more responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. This is when they're doing a lot of the adult firsts, right? You know, this is where they might get their first job, when they start driving, when they start taking ACT and SAT and starting having... And they're asked almost all the time, so what do you want to do after high school? So they have like almost this pressure to like know what they want to do, right? With their whole future. And they're really just kids, aren't they?
And don't forget about dating.
Oh, yes. Oh, my goodness, dating. Mm-hmm.
So this is a time where you may see, sometimes earlier for some than others, but the interest is starting to be evolving in terms of intimacy, if you will. So
maybe the first love,
first kiss.
Oh boy.
Yes. So these things are starting to emerge around this stage for many teens. So we also see a very strong trend towards autonomy.
Yeah.
Kids want to make their own decisions. They want to spend a lot more time with their friends. So unfortunately, you'll see a lot of maybe isolation in their rooms, unless you are totally not cool anymore as a parent.
Absolutely not.
And they also want to figure out who they are outside of their families. So they're going to be trying some new values and challenging maybe family values. They may start their first jobs, like we said, and then that expands that social interest and that sense of responsibility.
And that financial independence, too.
Absolutely.
Right? Mm-hmm.
At the same time they're taking on some of these responsibilities, their pressures are ramping up, too. This is when we see kids are really grounding in academics or athletics. The expectations take an uptick in high school sports.
Right.
The competition is much more intense. You may see kids feeling kind of deflated if they get cut from teams. And the demands of balancing academics, athletics, social interests, and work are all on their plate at this stage.
Right. And I think this is also staged naturally for parents to put a lot of pressure on adolescents because you're really thinking about that next stage for them and you want them to really excel and do the best at sports. So you got to get that scholarship, right? You've got to, if you want a car, you got to get a job. And, those types of pressures. Oh, you have to get a certain grade. You have to volunteer in the community. You have to, be part of XYZ so that you can be really get into Stanford or wherever you want to go, right? So that's where there's a lot of pressure from all points for teenagers in this stage.
And also we want to mention, as the pressures ramp up, the teens at this stage are feeling more like adult responsibility-based, right? They want to try out adult expectations. So you may see substance use, experimentation at this stage too, defiance, going out late, breaking curfew, some of those behaviors. So we really do want to make sure we're balancing the autonomy with the guidance and the rules and the support.
Right. Yeah. Really being there for them, as they naturally will make mistakes.
Yes. And all teens think they should have more independence than they are ready for at this stage. So brain is still developing. So maybe let's talk a little bit about what's happening in the mid-adolescent brain.
Oh, yes, please.
How these changes in thinking, emotion, and reward sensitivity are shaping their behaviors during these formative years. And also how you as parents can stay grounded during these ups and downs. So by mid-adolescence, the brain is still very much under construction, but it's beginning to take shape in some pretty fascinating ways. So when we think about the prefrontal cortex, which I'll remind you handles that planning, judgment, and impulsive control, this is continuing to develop and strengthen during these years, but it's still not fully developed. And that doesn't actually happen until we say about 26. Mid-20s is when the executive functioning system is fully developed. So we still have a long way to go.
Oh my goodness.
With impulse control and planning. This means that teens often have cognitive capacity to understand what's right or wrong or what could go wrong. But in the moment, they're still very impulsive and they still get kind of caught up in that excitement. And the logical part of the brain can get overridden by emotion or impulse control. And they're still kind of impressionable with other social implications at this stage. So even though they may know better, they don't always do better yet.
Right. But at some ways that can be good too, right? You know, they're excited about life and they're willing to try new things and just put themselves out there. They're not as much restricted by maybe the anxieties or doubt or fear of rejection that we kind of develop as we get older.
Gets a little older,
right?
Yeah.
You know, like, hey, let's do that road trip. Let's, let's take this trip to, I am not coming up with anything off the top of my head. But, that's when my daughter this summer wanted to go on a trip to Michigan with her friends. And they just wanted to go and explore. I did go as a chaperone. But it was cool that they just wanted to do that. And I think that's really fun to be kind of spontaneous.
One of the things I see with spontaneity with adolescents is they just don't plan social outings until the last minute.
Oh my gosh.
So when you're saying to your child, "What are you doing this weekend?" they actually really don't know.
Yeah.
They have no ideas. It's kind of the group plan, and it's very impulsive and last minute. Some kids take this with stride. Other kids get very anxious about it. And there's that FOMO of not wanting to miss out. So there's a lot of stressors that can go along with that lack of planning piece in this stage of development as well.
Yeah, I noticed that with this generation too, because everybody has phones, that you have 6 14-year-olds talking only to each other to try to plan something, right? And not involving any parent or any idea of how they're going to get there until it's like, hey, Mom, can you take us to the movies? Or can you take us to the mall? Like, who's us? And when and why? And how long? And they're like, oh, I don't know. I mean, it's just... Yeah, it can be pretty frustrating as a parent.
But we know Amanda's going to be the driver, so she can get the scoop.
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit more of what's going on developmentally in the brain. The dopamine system. This is tied to reward and motivation, if you remember. So during mid-adolescence, dopamine surges to make new experiences, risks, and social rewards feel extra powerful. So there's a lot of thrill-seeking at this stage, trying new things, pushing the limits. That's very appealing. My teen would love to argue for the sake of arguing. And it wasn't because he was being defiant. I think he just liked the energy in the debate and kind of pushing those limits to see how far he could stretch the rules, for example. It's very appealing at that stage. And this is particularly when friends are watching. So you have to be mindful that peer influence isn't just social, it can also be neurological. Being with peers at this stage is actually amplifying the brain's reward response, and it makes risky behaviors even more exciting. So that's a little trickier for parents to manage.
Absolutely, because there's a big difference of how do you manage an individual team versus a group of teens, right?
Yes, yes.
For some adults, there's nothing more terrifying than a group of teens that are coming into your store or whatever, because you just don't know how they're going to react, because they kind of like feed off each other and push each other type of thing. So yeah, I get that.
So I think if we sum up, in mid-adolescence, you've got a brain that's faster, it's more efficient, it's incredibly responsive to rewards, but it's still missing a fully developed control center. This is a powerful combination that drives curiosity, creativity, and exploration, but it also explains why teens can be very impulsive, easily influenced, and at times that perception that they're invincible.
Yeah. They call it like the Superman complex
yes.
in a way, right? You know, you watch some of those YouTube videos of teens skateboarding off roofs and stuff like that, right?
Parkour was a thing for a while, right?
Yeah.
Jumping off of balconies.
Right. Yes, yes. Let's not do that, right? Let's be more realistic and safe. But let's talk a little bit about those physical changes, too, around this stage. So here we're, puberty is pretty much done, right? For most of the kids, I know that girls tend to end puberty a little bit earlier, and boys keep growing often through high school. But for the most part, they're really starting to look like adults.
Yes.
And honestly, sometimes you can't tell if they're in high school or college or, a young 20-something at this stage, depending on their development and how they dress and hold themselves. So it's something to keep in mind. And they're also much more concerned, too, at this stage about their appearance, being attractive or fit, really comparing themselves not only to their peers, but also really influenced by those influencers. Back in our day, it would have been magazines, but now I think it's like Instagram influencers and things like that. That
social media.
Yeah, social media.
Celebrities.
Right, yeah.
I think that's a really big, important piece to think about with body image.
Right.
This is where we want to be very mindful that this is where some risky behaviors can come, like eating restrictions, a lot of comparisons with body image, eating disorders, and things of that nature can play a role in their identity or just their self-esteem.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And what about emotional changes? Kind of what are some things that teens are experiencing in this stage?
We did talk a lot about brain development and that increased desire for independence and autonomy during this stage. In this case, we are seeing maybe a little more defiance and conflict with parents because we are seeing teens wanting to make their own choices, shape their own routines, and pushing for more control over their lives. So they may be pushing back about rules, and this often leads to more conflict with parents, especially with boundary testing.
Oh, absolutely. My biggest pet peeve, but what I hear all the time from my teens whenever I tell them, to do something or give them advice, they're like, I know. Because now they know everything, right? They are the expert in their 15 years of life, They know everything.
And parents are nags.
Yes.
Because we keep asking them to do things that they're supposed to do. But the problem is they're not maybe doing it.
Right. Yeah.
So they're overextended. Right. So, this I think is where we do see a lot of boundary testing, a lot of pushback against the rules. So this isn't really just about defiance. It's about development.
Right.
We're seeing kids arguing, negotiating, disagreeing. These are all ways that kids are testing independence.
Well, they're also, as you mentioned earlier, expanding their worldview. So they might really be getting a perspective of like, wow, my family does this, and either I really like it or I really don't because this other family is doing X, Y, Z, or I learned in school about this social issue and my family doesn't care about it or isn't even aware. Like, why don't they know about these things, right? And kind of figuring out what they're passionate about and what the strengths and weaknesses of the parents. I think they're starting to realize that we're human.
Yeah, not superhuman.
We're not superhuman. We're people.
Well, and they're also doing a lot of critical thinking, which is even promoted in school. So they're able to think about thinking and thinking about the world in different ways and sometimes having very idealized views about things that they're experiencing either on social media or in school or having conversations with among their peers. And that can lead to conflicts and value conflicts specifically in home environments.
Yeah, I noticed that my teens are really starting to want to have really deep, meaningful conversations about topics, right? What's going on with these protests, for example? And what do you think about that? But really what they want to know is have us ask, what do you think about that?
Yes,
right?
Sharing their perspectives.
Yes, they want to be asked. They want to be heard, and they want us to value their perspective on these things. So it really is a shift in parenting to engage them in more deeper, meaningful conversations about life, about topics, and that's something that's more stimulating for them. That dips into those dopamines, right?
Yeah, absolutely, to feel that you have a connection with their interests.
Right.
But comparatively, I think also during this period, a lot of parents will say their teens are isolating more. They're sharing less. They're in their rooms. There's a lot less disclosure, just general disclosure about their day. They tend to share at times fewer details about school. They're more secretive, at least it appears to be secretive about friendships, and they may not talk about their feelings. And that withdrawal from a parent-child dynamic can be very frustrating or even worrisome.
Right. Yeah, you're worried about
parents.
what they're going through.
Yeah, they're wondering why the disconnect. They start to worry about what might be going on behind the scenes. But in reality, this could be rooted in a fear of disappointing parents.
Yeah.
That need to, not be living up to those parental expectations and values because they are starting to question some of those things.
So some advice I got from a colleague that really resonated to me when I started parenting teens was that whenever they're ready to talk to you, and it will always be when you're ready to go to bed and you're completely exhausted.
Absolutely.
Is to listen to them. Take the time. You may be tired the next day, just buy yourself an extra Starbucks, but when they need you, it's really important to be available to them because they're only going to come to you in their own time, not on your time.
Absolutely. I do notice this with my own kiddos. They're bigger now, of course, but I still like to call them kiddos. My son will come in to talk to me at 10 o'clock at night, and he's jacked up. And he's ready to go. And what I realize is when you are talking to your child, put your phone down, turn your direction to them, and take a genuine interest. This really is going to go a long way in fostering that connection that they are seeking, is that they know that they're valued and they're important, and that you're giving them your attention. And if you can't, for some reason, give them the attention in that moment, say, I really can tell you need my attention right now. When can we talk about this? I can see this is important for you.
Yeah. No, that's critical. That's great.
One other thing I think we can talk about a bit is during mid-adolescence is what's going on with adolescent identity formation. We're seeing teens at this time actively experimenting with not only their roles and their values and beliefs, but even aspects of sexuality and self-expression. So this is where you're seeing that who am I really as I separate from my parents and I individualize myself from my peer group. So this is where you may see some experimentation with different clothing styles, hairstyles, just music, peer groups, and they're really looking for a healthy, this is really part of them building a healthy, stable sense of self, is that exploration of that, of these factors.
Well, that was beautifully said, Lisa. So basically, as parents, we really need to recognize that our teens being more distant, trying new fads, exploring new things and ideas is not only normal, but part of healthy development. I know for myself, it's difficult to transition into this stage when I used to have a little cuddly kid that would hang out and give me hugs every day, and would want to tell me everything. And now they're don't want to have anything to do with me at all. And I'm lucky if I can get a hello out of them. So as a parent, I need to transition into more of a coach, kind of like setting guidelines and expectations, monitoring them to make sure that they're thriving and not falling backwards, but also giving them space to kind of play their game of life and be there to guide and listen to them. But trust that they have that kind of like strong foundation to make good decisions for themselves, which might look different from what I or you pictured.
Absolutely. Well, I think this is a really good place to stop for this episode, Amanda. But first, let's summarize. Middle adolescence, we talked about being a powerful period of self-discovery, increased autonomy, and heightened peer influence. It can be intense, transformative, and sometimes pretty exhausting for both parents and teens. But the good news is that teens do not stay in this identity-searching, risk-taking zone forever.
Hallelujah!
So if you want to go deeper into the developmental journey, listen to our next episode on late adolescence, which covers ages 18 to 24 and the transition into adulthood. This is where teens are refining who they are, what they value, and how they want to move through the world. If you'd like more information regarding our first 2 episodes, you can find blogs and parent handouts in the podcast descriptions, which have links to our organizational websites. You can also follow us and leave a review. We'd love your reviews. Tell us what you want to hear more of. And thank you for joining us, and we hope you will join us for future segments of Inside the Teen Mind. If today's episode resonated and you're looking for professional support, Connick & Associates specializes in therapy and comprehensive assessments for teens and families with a strong focus on neurodivergence, adolescent development, and parenting support.
And if your teen who's 5th grade through 12th grade is looking for a place to feel accepted, connected with other peers, and build confidence outside of a traditional setting, the Alive Center offers teen-led, teen-driven programming that supports social connection, leadership, and belonging.
You can learn more about both Connick & Associates and Alive Center through the links in our show notes.
And if this episode was helpful, we'd love for you to subscribe, leave a review, share it, and join us for the next conversation.